when I started out as a rookie. No one had told me a lot about the job in terms of weird things that could happen. I'm assuming this was largely to prevent me from freaking out and abandoning the park. But a few months into my service, when I was still a rookie, a friend and I were drunk at a party, and he opened up a bit. Yeah, it can get a little crazy out there, I guess. I think the worst ones are when people die when they just shouldn't, you know? Or when we find them dead like 10 minutes after someone says they saw them last. They were fine when I passed them on the switchback, I swear. That sort of crap. Like, take this guy who I found one spring out on a really popular trail. Someone comes into the VC freaking out about some guy who's lying in the middle of his path in this giant pool of blood. So we run out there and we find this guy dead as a doornail. Which he absolutely should be, because the back of his head is like mashed potatoes. The skull's decimated, brains are leaking out like custard filling. And the guy's old, so you figure, yeah, he probably fell and hit his head. Old people fall all the time, it's no big deal. Except that this area where he fell doesn't have any big rocks. There's not even any stumps or big branches. And on top of that, there's no blood trail, so he clearly died where he dropped. Now that's when you turn to murder. But there were people just out of line of sight with the guy. If someone came up behind him and murdered him, there's no way someone wouldn't have heard. And again, even if someone had, there'd be a blood trail and spatter all over the place. But everyone on the scene said it looked exactly like he'd fallen and smashed his head on a rock. So what the hell did he hit his head on? And then there was this lady I found in a different park about 5 years ago, back when I was upstate. We found her in the middle of a stand of big junipers, curled around the trunk like she was hugging it. We pick her up to move her, and a goddamn waterfall comes out of her mouth, splashes all over my shoes. Her clothes are dry, and her hair is dry, but the amount of water in her lungs and stomach was phenomenal. Unreal, man. Coroner's report says the cause of death was drowning. Her lungs were completely full of water. This, even though we're in the middle of the high desert and there isn't a body of water for miles. No puddles, no nothing. No signs of anyone else being out there. I mean, yeah, it's possible they were murdered. But why go out of the way to do it like that? Why not just stab them and be done with it? I don't know. It just sits weird with me. And that was what he told me. Now, of course, that freaked me out a little. But we were wasted, and I guess I sort of wrote it off as a fluke. I also assumed there was exaggeration there, since, you know, we were wasted. Now, I don't like talking about this next case very much. It was an awful one that I've done my best to forget about. But of course, that's easier said than done. This happened about 6 months after the conversation with my friend at the bar, and up until that point, I hadn't had a lot of really weird stuff go down. A few things here and there, and of course the stairs. But it's amazingly easy to get used to stuff like that when it's treated as though it's normal. This case was a little different. A guy with Down syndrome in his 20s went missing after his family lost sight of him on a major path. That was odd in and of itself, because this guy never left his mum's side. She was absolutely convinced he'd been kidnapped, and unfortunately, a ranger who isn't with the park anymore insinuated that no one was going to kidnap someone, well, with that kind of disability. Not very tactful, to say the least. We wasted a lot of time trying to calm her down enough to get information about him, and then we put out an official missing persons call. Because of the urgency of the situation, him being mostly unable to function alone, we had local police come in and help us. We didn't find him the first night, which was heartbreaking. None of us wanted to think of him being alone out there. We assumed he just kept wandering and was staying ahead of us. We brought out helis the next day, and they spotted him in a little canyon. I helped bring him back up, but he was in bad shape, and I think we all knew he wasn't going to make it. He'd fallen and broken his spine, and couldn't feel his lower half. He'd also broken both of his legs, one at the femur, and he'd lost a lot of blood. He was confused and scared while he was alone, so he'd probably exacerbated the injuries by dragging himself a little ways. I know it sounds awful, but while I was riding in the copter with him, I asked him why he'd wandered off. I just wanted something to tell his mother, to let her know it wasn't her fault, because he was fading fast, and I didn't think she'd get to ask him herself. He was crying, and he'd said something about how the little sad boy had wanted him to come play. He said the little boy wanted to trade so he could go home. Then he closed his eyes, and when he woke up again, he was in the canyon. I'm not sure that's exactly what he said, but it was what I thought the gist of it was. He kept crying, asking where his mummy was, and I held his hand and tried my best to keep him calm. It was cold out there, he kept saying that. It was cold out there. My legs were frozen. It was cold out there. It's cold in me. He was getting even weaker, so he eventually stopped talking, and he closed his eyes for a little while. Then, when we were about 5 minutes from the hospital, he looked right at me, with these big tears running down his face, and he said, "Mama won't see me no more. Love Mama. Wish she was here." And he closed his eyes, and he just never woke up. It was horrible, and I don't like talking about it. That case was one of the first ones that really rattled me badly. Because of how badly it affected me, I reached out to a senior ranger who ended up helping me through it. As time went on, and we got to know each other better, he ended up sharing one of his own stories with me. It was disturbing, but it helped to know that I wasn't the only one affected by the things going on out there. This is what he told me. "I think this must have happened before you got here, because I think if it had happened while you were here, you'd have remembered it. Trust me. I know it didn't end up in the news for some reason, but I think most people who've been here long enough know about it. The park sold off a portion of land to a logging company, and it was a really controversial thing. But it wasn't that large or old of a plot, and it was right after the recession, so he needed cash bad. Anyway, they were felling this plot of land, and we get a call that we need to get our supervisors out right away. I don't know why, but they ended up sending me and a few other guys along with the heads, I guess for power in numbers, to see what was up. We got there, and all these guys are crowded around a tree that they've just cut down. They're all pissed off and freaking out, and the foreman comes over and says he wants to know what we think we're up to. "What the hell y'all think this is? Some kind of sick joke? You've got a lot of damn nerve pulling this crap. We bought this land fair and square." Well, we don't know what the hell he's talking about, so he brings us over to this felled tree and points at it, and tells us that when they cut it down, it was just like this, and they'll be damned if they put it there. The inside of the tree was all rotted out and hollow in one spot, and when they cut it down, it had exposed that chamber, and inside it is a hand. Like a perfectly severed hand. And it looks like it's actually fused with the inside of the tree. Well, now we think they're putting a joke, so we tell them that we don't like being screwed with, and we start to leave. But they tell us they've already called the cops, and that they'll go right to the media if we don't stick around. Well, that gets the head's attention, so they stick around and talk to the police about it. Everyone's denying that they put the hand in there, and besides, how would anyone have even done it? It's clearly a real hand, but it's not mummified or skeletal. It's brand new, probably not even a day old. And it's definitely fused with the wood. You can see that it's coming right out of it. The loggers, they insist that they didn't put it there. Somehow, this fresh human hand ended up fused to the inside of this living tree. The cops have them cut up that section of tree into a movable chunk. Then they take the hand away, and the area is closed off. There's a pretty big investigation, but I know they didn't find any answers. Now it's become this legend, and as far as I know, we haven't sold any more property for logging. So, that was his story. Whether it's true or not, I'll leave that up to you. As you all know, I went to a training seminar recently, and I heard some amazing and horrible things there. One of the guys I talked to while I was there told me a story when we were all around the campfire one night. We were both pretty drunk. I guess you're seeing a pattern here. And we were swapping stories. He told me this one. Me and another guy were out on a field search because some campers reported screaming noises at night. So we head out there to look for whatever damn mountain lion has wandered into the area, and I'm pissed. We've had 3 of them show up in the camping areas that year alone, and I'm getting tired as hell of constantly having to deal with them. Plus, I just don't like them anyway. They're a pain in the ass, and they're loud and they scare the hell out of me. Goddamn cats. Pieces of crap. I'm groaning about it to the guy I'm with, and he thinks it's a real damn riot. So we're seeing all these broken branches and what look like dens, and we're pretty sure we know where this thing is. I call in, and they tell me to confirm if possible, which you know just means they want you to step in a big pile of crap and use that as proof. I'm not seeing any though, so I basically just tell them to shove it. I'm done. We know that damn thing's out here somewhere, even if I'm not stepping in its crap or inside its mouth or whatever. Guy I'm with wanders off to take a piss or something, and I stay behind, watching this little burrow under a tree to see if maybe a fox or something is living under it, because I love foxes, man. They're cute as hell. But anyway, I'm watching this tree, and I start hearing branches cracking, and it's coming from the direction my partner went opposite of. Now, I've got my pistol, but you and I both know that's not going to do crap against a cat. I cock it and holler for my partner to get his dumb ass back, but he's too far and he can't hear me. I stand up and get my sights on where the thing's approaching, and I kid you not, man, I just about peed myself. This guy's coming towards me, and he's backflipping through the damn woods. Like, instead of walking, he's doing these crazy damn backflips. And I swear to God, he cleared every log and bush in his path. It was like he knew right where he was going. I yell at the guy to stop right where he is, that I'm pointing a gun right at him, but he keeps coming, and I just kinda lost it. I shot at the ground in front of him, and it was a dumb thing to do, but man, I didn't want this guy anywhere near me. When I fired, he was about 50 yards from me, and as soon as the gun goes off, he whirls around and goes off, backflipping back into the woods. My partner hears my gun go off and runs back and asks what's up, and I tell him there's some goddamn weirdo out here, hopped up on God knows what, and we need to get the hell out of Dodge. I let the cops know what happened, and I didn't get in any trouble for firing, but man, I don't know what that jerk was on. I've never seen anything like that before. It was absolutely goddamn crazy. I think we can agree that there's stuff going on out here in the woods. And while I'm not going to spout off about what it could be, or offer any theories, What I want people to take away from all of this is that it's so damn important to be safe when you're out there. I know a lot of you think you're invincible, but the fact is that you can die out there, or be hurt, or go missing. It's easier than you'd ever imagine. One of the topics that I get asked about a lot, here and in real life, involved things like the rake, the wendigo, and other related legends. I can't honestly say that I know a lot about any of them, but based on some light reading I did, I can say that I've heard stories that seem to be loosely related to them. You've heard the old adage that legends like that come from somewhere, and I'm sure that's true. But as you all know, I do try to take things with a grain of salt. You have to, out here. It's sort of like working in a hospital, I'd imagine. You could spend all day thinking about how many people have died there, and how there are probably ghosts, or whatever you want to call them, all over the place. But it doesn't do you any good. It just makes it harder to do your job. I think a lot of us feel that way, and that's why we try to just go about our work like everything's fine. Once you get paranoid, there's not really any going back, and a lot of cadets quit because of it. My park especially seems to have a high turnover rate, because the cadets graduate and get so freaked out about everything, and they can't seem to let it go. You have to learn to internalize things and shut off. I've talked to KD a bit about her experience, because I wanted to know what she thought about the Wendigo. She didn't really have anything in particular to say about it, aside from that she didn't want to think about it that much. She did tell me that a friend of hers has had something similar happen. I contacted this person, H, over Skype, and they agreed to talk to me for a bit. They're aware of my work here, and they're fine with me posting the story exactly as they wrote it. This is what they said. I grew up in Central Oregon, and there's a reservation called Warm Springs, about 2 or so hours from where I lived. I only mention that because a lot of people in my area have friends there, and a lot of the land in that area belongs to that tribe. When I was a kid, we used to go camping up there. Not on the res, of course, but in that area, and I met a lot of kids who grew up there. I got to know one kid really well. His name was Nolan, and we ended up hanging out a lot when our families were in the area. Our folks got to know each other, so we'd all get in touch and camp out around the same time. We'd camp for about 2 weeks, so we were out there for a long time. And it was at this point I asked him if he camped in an RV. He went on, "Yeah, my dad had one, so I guess it wasn't really camping. But we'd take our tents and stuff and set them up out away from camp most nights. I didn't like sleeping in there because I like being outside. So anyway, sorry. One year, Nolan and I were out there. I think we must have been like 12 or so. We wanted to go out and camp near the river, as we wanted to try night fishing. I think we must have been about 1/3 of a mile from the main camp. Far enough away that we couldn't hear or see anyone else, I remember that. We were messing around most of the day. I don't really remember much about it, but we ended up building a fire at some point. I was really impressed because he had this flint or something that he used to start it. I'd never seen anyone do that before, so I thought it was pretty cool. I got him to teach me how to do it, and we lit some stuff on fire, which looking back was really stupid, because it was the middle of summer, and if I remember right, the fire warning was either at yellow or orange. But thankfully, we didn't start anything major, and when it got dark, we sat around and talked about whatever it is 12-year-olds talk about. I don't really remember. What I do remember is that at some point, he looked over my shoulder at the river and asked me if I could see something. The way our camp was set up, we were about 10 feet from the river, and we were at the widest point, so it was probably about 20 feet to the other bank. It gets hot up there in the summer, but the water's still cold, which is important. I look over my shoulder, and I could see something wading into the river on the other side. From where we were, it looked like a deer, but we couldn't really tell because of the fire. I got up to look closer, and I saw a pair of antlers, so I figured it was just a buck. But I thought it was weird it was wading into the water, and it was definitely heading for us, so I asked Nolan what he thought we should do. He's looking at the fire with this weird expression, and he tells me to sit down and shut up, so I do, because I'd never seen him act that way before. He's whispering at me to ignore it, and to just keep talking like we were, but I couldn't think of anything to say. He was saying something about an episode of some show, but I could hear the deer coming through the water, so I wasn't really paying any attention. I kept trying to see over his shoulder, but every time I did, he'd sort of hit me on the arm and make me look at him. I wasn't really scared. I remember I was just sort of confused. But then, I heard the deer come out of the water, and I could kind of make out what it looked like. And I realised it wasn't a deer, because whatever it was walking on 2 legs. I started to get up. I was super freaked out, but Nolan just yanked me back down and talked louder about this TV show. And I could tell he was just as scared as I was, probably even more. He leaned in and poked the fire with a stick, and he whispered that whatever I do, I can't speak to it. I could see it come closer, and it stood right behind Nolan's back. I was about ready to pee my pants, and I think I'd probably have run if I'd been alone, but I didn't want to leave Nolan. So I kept sitting really still and sneaking glances at it. It wasn't that tall, but the way it carried itself was just wrong, like its centre of balance was screwed up. I can't really describe it, but it was kind of like it kept shifting too far forward. It just stood there behind Nolan for a long time, and eventually Nolan ran out of things to say, and we just kind of sat there for a second. The fire was making noise, but I thought I could hear this thing talking in a really low voice. I couldn't hear what it was saying, and I leaned forward a tiny little bit. And I actually did pee my pants when it leaned forward too. I couldn't see its face, but I saw its eyes. They were cloudy and milky, and if you want to know what they looked like, find that scene from Lord of the Rings where Frodo falls in the lake and all the dead people are floating towards him. That's what its eyes looked like. So all I saw were these 2 white eyes floating above Nolan's head, and the really vague shape of the antlers coming out of its head. I don't know what my face looked like, but at exactly the same time, we both booked it out of there, and we ran non-stop until we got back to the main camp. My pants were soaked with pee, so I took them off as we were running and threw them in the bushes. We both stopped once we were in front of my dad's RV, and we couldn't see anything chasing us, so we stood there and caught our breath. I asked him what that thing was, but he said he didn't know. He said his grandpa had only warned him that if anything ever came up to him when he was out in the desert, he was never, ever supposed to talk to it or listen to anything it had to say. I wanted to know if he'd heard it talking too, and he said the only thing he'd been able to understand was help you. I think we ended up sleeping in the RV with my parents, and the next night we went back out and didn't see anything. That does remind me, in a lot of ways, of the Wendigo legend. There's a phrase used to describe it that I think fits it perfectly, which is that the Wendigo is the spirit of the lonely places. I know, sometimes, when I'm out in the wilds, where I know there's no one around me for miles and miles. I get this weird kind of craving that I can't really explain. I don't know if it happens to anyone else, but it's this desire to consume. It's not like I crave anything in particular, but more like this weird, distracting hunger that comes from every part of my gut. I also wanted to find out more about the faceless man, if I was able, and found a few similar things. I asked around my circle of friends, and one of them said when he was out doing repairs at a park in his area, he saw something kind of like that. We were having dinner in town, 5 of us, including myself. This guy, he was repainting an information booth, and he heard a man asking for directions to the nearest campsite. He didn't turn around because he was up on a ladder, but he informed the man that there weren't any campsites nearby, but that if he headed down the road about 4 miles, he'd find one at another park. He asked if he could be of any other help, but the man said no and thanked him. My friend said he kept painting, but he was listening and never heard the man leave. He said to me, the second he came up and talked to me, the hairs on my neck stood up, and I wasn't sure why. I just had this really uneasy feeling about the whole thing, and I wanted to finish painting and get out of there. I figured maybe part of it was that I couldn't turn around to look at him, but something just felt off. There was also this weird smell floating around, even before the guy talked to me. Kind of like old period blood. I'd looked around to see what was causing it, but I didn't find anything. So I waited for the guy to walk away, but I didn't hear him leave, which made me think he was just standing there and watching me. So I asked again if I could do anything for him, and he didn't answer. I knew he was there though, because I hadn't heard him leave. So I did this awkward turn on the ladder to look down and see what he was doing. Now, I admit it could have just been my brain messing up, but I swear to you, Russ, for a split second when I turned around, that guy didn't have a face. Like, he had no face. It was almost concave and totally smooth. And I just about had a goddamn heart attack because I couldn't even wrap my brain around what I was seeing. I think I started to say something, but there was this kind of pop inside my head, and suddenly, he was just a normal-looking guy. I must have looked weird because he asked me if I was okay, and I was just like, yeah, I'm fine. He asks about the campsite again, and I point to where he has to go, and he's like, I'm not from around here, can you help me get there? Now, this is when I know something is really up, because there's no way this guy got out here and didn't know where he was. And for that matter, there's no car around, so how'd he get here in the first place? I said I was sorry, but that I couldn't take him anywhere in a company vehicle. And he's like, please? I really don't know where I am. Can you come with me and help me get there? So now I'm seriously weirded out, and I start wondering if this is some kind of ambush or whatever. I told him I could call him a taxi to come out and take him wherever he wants to go. So I pull out my phone, and he just goes, no, and walks away really quickly. But he doesn't walk out of the park. He walks back into the goddamn trees, and I got right in my truck and start to get out of there. Screw the painting. I looked in my mirror to see where he was as I was leaving, and he was standing right at the tree line again. I don't know how he got there so fast, but this time, I know he didn't have a face. He was just watching me leave, and right before I turned the corner, he took a big step back into the trees and kind of dissolved. Maybe it was just so dark he blended in, but it felt more like he just melted away. Again, that was his story. Whether you believe him or not is up to you. Interestingly though, right after this guy finished his story, someone else piped up with another one, but with a slightly different twist. This is what he told me. You know, actually, I had something sort of weird like that happen a while back. I was doing some trail scouting, and I was out in the middle of nowhere figuring out where we were going to have this trail run through. I hadn't seen anyone else for probably a good 2 hours, so I wasn't really paying attention to where I was going. I was just looking at the ground for the most part. Then, out of nowhere, I crested this little hill and almost ran into this guy. He was older, probably in his 60s, and I started to apologise to him for running into him. And then I noticed his face, and I probably looked like a complete douchebag because I stopped and I just stared at him. It took me a second to figure out what was wrong, but this guy's face was huge. I know that sounds weird, but that's the only way I could describe it. His head wasn't big or anything, it was normal, but the amount of space his face took up was just way too much. Like if you took someone's face and enlarged it all by about 2 times. He doesn't say anything, he just kind of looks at me. And I backed up and was kind of stuttering and saying I was sorry. And I went around him and got out of there and did what I needed to do. The whole time, I kept looking behind me because I was so freaked out that he'd pop up behind me or something. I know it sounds ridiculous, but I swear to you, it was one of the creepiest things I've ever seen. I switched the topic to the stairs a little later, and there was a definite shift in enthusiasm. No one spoke up at first. There's a real stigma about discussing them, even when we were away from work. But I broke the ice with a story of my own, and the guy who told the story about the faceless man told this one, albeit very quietly. A couple of years ago, I was camping with my girlfriend, and we were about 2 miles from the road at this site I know. We went to bed that night, but we couldn't sleep because someone interjected a funny comment, and we were dangerously close to going off on another subject, but I got us back on track. He continued, "Yeah, really funny, you idiot. No, it was because we kept hearing that grinding noise. My brother used to grind his teeth in his sleep, and it kind of reminded me of that. My girlfriend was freaking out, but I just kept telling her to ignore it because I've heard it before, and you just have to ignore it. It goes away eventually. You guys know what I mean." We all knew what he meant. So eventually, I got her to go to sleep, but I woke up probably 2 hours later because something was just off. I rolled over, and she wasn't there, and I kind of freaked out because he thought for a second, and then he took a very long drink. Anyway, I ran out of the tent calling her name, but I didn't have to go far. She was standing at the edge of the camp, looking at something in the trees, and I could see she was really pale. The fire was low, but bright enough to see her. Anyway, so I ran up to see what was going on, and she was dead asleep, but her eyes were open. She had this real spaced out look, you know. So I put my arm around her to lead her back, but she wouldn't move. She just said really quietly something like, "I have to go now, Eddie. I have to go. It's here." I was like, "You're just sleepwalking. Come back to bed." But she wouldn't budge. She just kept standing there and saying that she had to go. And I looked where she was looking, and there was a goddamn staircase right there, about 15 yards away. Grey one, concrete. And she started to walk towards it, but I yanked her back, and that woke her up. She looked at me like I was out of my mind, and she asked what the hell she was doing out of the tent. I didn't tell her anything. I just told her she was sleepwalking. The grinding was gone, so she just went back to the tent with me and fell asleep again. I don't know. I don't like thinking about it, you know. We all knew. You guys remember that kid with, I can't remember what it was. Some kind of brain thing. Not Downs, but something like it. Well, I got to read the report he gave when they found him a week after he went missing. And it was messed up beyond belief. I mean, you have to take it with a grain of salt, because who knows what that kid actually thinks is real. But some of this stuff, I don't think he could have made it up. Like what? Well, first of all, he talked about the stairs. He said he'd been watching his dad build a fire, and the stairs came up to him, and he had to go up them or something bad would happen. The cops couldn't really understand what he was talking about after that, because he just kept saying, like the campfire, over and over. And he kept mentioning sounds, but he couldn't say what sounds, just that it was loud, and he covered his ears so he couldn't hear them. But the thing I remember most is they asked him where exactly he'd gone, and he just said he was right there. He kept pointing at himself, and they said they thought that meant that he thought he'd never left. He said he wasn't scared because the stairs were there, and he said they talked to him, but not like people talk. Like I said, it was really convoluted and hard to understand, and I have a feeling the cops didn't take most of it down. They ended up just saying the kid had some kind of amnesia or fugue, and they didn't think foul play was involved. Doesn't really explain, though, why he came back a week later perfectly fine, without a speck of dirt on him and well fed. But hey, what the cops say goes. Anyway, my final update will be next week. I'll see you then.